In this scenario, we've opened up the file inconsistentprinter.pcapng. Here we have several users in a specific department of our organization who have complained that they're unable to print the documents they want to print. They seem to print out the first few pages and then it just kind of stops and dies and the job never actually prints, which is quite problematic. So that's what we're investigating. The help desk folks think that it's a network problem and we have to determine if it is indeed a network problem, since this is a network printer and we're printing via IP address here. So let's look at that. In this case, we have two IP addresses that are consistent throughout the capture. We have 172.16.0.8 and 172.16.0.253. The first of these is the client, the second of these, the destination, and this first packet is the printer. So the printer is 172.16.0.253. In this case, what we've done is we've sent a print job to the printer and captured the packets that are being sent and exchanged in this scenario. Now, in this case, we have TCP-based communication. We can see that right off the bat. We see we have a three-way handshake to kick things off. So we see a SYN in the first packet, SYN-ACK in the second packet, and then finally an ACK in the third packet. So we have a TCP session that is established. It looks like we're communicating over port 9100 here, which is what the printer is receiving data on. So far, everything looks good. Now, we don't have a lot of packets here. We just have a few, looks like 122 packets. But since we're troubleshooting something like this where something seems to be working and it appears maybe it's timing out, one thing I often like to look at is the capture file properties window here under statistics, just to see how much time we're dealing with. In this case, we see under elapsed here that this took 26 seconds to send this print job and get that data over, which quite honestly seems like a lot. That's for not necessarily a lot of data. So we can actually look at the bytes here and see that we sent it looks like 128,000 bytes, which is not a lot. For that to take 26 seconds, something doesn't quite jive there. It should be a little bit faster than that, and you can tell by just looking at the bytes per second and bits per second averaged out over the length of the capture. It's quite low. So at this point, we don't know if it's a network issue. It very well could be, but there's definitely something not jiving with the amount of data that's being sent across the wire here and the duration of the time it necessarily took. So that's what I think we want to dig in here with as our first avenue of investigation. Since we're concerned about the timing of things, one thing that might help us is to adjust our time column so that it's actually showing us a little bit more helpful values. Right now it's showing us time since the beginning of the capture, so it's cumulative, but I'm going to go to view up here in time display format and change that to seconds since previous captured packet. And when I'm looking at a single conversation, this is how I generally like to look at this time column. Not as useful looking at seconds since the previous captured packets if you're doing a capture with multiple conversations, but for a single conversation, I think this this works really well. So we can actually scroll down pretty quickly and see where big gaps occur, and we don't really see one of those up until we get to packet 32, and that's where we see a big hiccup. We see 1.17 seconds, which is a lot of time when you're talking about network-based communication. Now, of interest in this packet, if we go to the right here, is we see that there's a TCP window update, and this is coming from the printer, so from 172.16.0.253, and that window update is basically telling us that the receive buffer of the printer has changed. Generally, it means it's probably lowered, and in a case where we're concerned about something like this, we can verify that by looking at the window size value down here in the packet details window. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and right-click that, and let's go ahead and apply that as a column so we can see, and it looks like here it's 4,724 bytes. It was pretty small right here too, but it's definitely been changed in this case. So that's of interest. We have the TCP window update, which by itself is maybe not super weird, but the fact combined with this time change is a little bit odd. So let's keep scrolling down here and see if we can see any other changes to the TCP receive buffer of the printer at 172.16.0.253. And sure enough, if I keep scrolling down, we are going to see more of those. It looks like there's one right here. We see a window update. Scrolling down, we're going to see a few more of those. Now, things get really interesting, I think, more so when you get to the end of the capture, and that's going to make sense, right? We have this issue where people are printing, it prints the first few pages, and then it stops, and that's kind of congruent with what we see at the end of the capture. we see 3 packets, and notice the time display here. In this case, we have between packet 119 and 120, we have 4.7 seconds. Between 120 and 121, we have 5.5 seconds. And between 121 and 122, we have 5.6 seconds. So just right here, we have 15 seconds of latency, which is completely unacceptable in network communications. That's not great, right? We all know that. So why is this happening? Why is this issue come to light? And I think we can find that answer over here by looking at what we see here. We see that the TCP window is full. So we saw all those Windows updates. We saw that the receive buffer on the printer may have been having some issues, and that kind of manifests right here. When we see that the TCP window is full, that means our sender cannot send any more data to the recipient system. It won't be received. And for that reason, we see a few different retransmissions going on here. These last 3 packets are simply retransmissions of the same packet from 172.16.0.8 to 172.16.0.253. So those retransmissions are problematic, and they're the source of our problem here. Now you can actually filter on retransmissions if you want, which can maybe be a helpful thing from time to time. I can go down here under TCP analysis flags, see where it says this frame is a suspected retransmission, and we can go ahead and apply a filter there, and it will give us those retransmitted packets here, which can be a useful way to look for errors. You can also look for the TCP analysis information that we've already looked at earlier, the expert info, if you will. That's a useful way to see these types of error messages when they're present. And if you have a lot of packets to look at, this is a good way to do that. See, it summarizes a lot of the things we've already talked about at this point, these TCP window error messages, the TCP window full messages, and so on. So that's of interest to us. Now, the question becomes, at this point, is the problem related to the client, or is it related to the server, or the printer in this case, serving the role of a server, so to speak? The issue here is, generally speaking, the printer, right? The printer, for some reason, its window became full, its receive buffer became full, and we can't send it data anymore. I will say in this scenario, upon further investigation, we find that the printer actually has an issue with its memory, so it's got some corrupted memory sectors, and so print jobs of a certain size will print a little bit, and then there's a memory issue which doesn't allow any more network data to be received. So maybe you could print a 2 or 3 page document, but not a 20 or 30 page document, and that's what's gone on here. So just another example of looking at a single conversation, looking at what TCP is telling us about the errors that are occurring, and digging in and making judgments based upon that. Doesn't tell us the full story, doesn't tell us what's wrong with the printer, but it does tell us in this case that the printer is the likely issue related to this problem we're experiencing.